evening, peoples, and welcome back to my living room. I'm Pastor Leia, and this is my co-host Gingersnap, who is, of course, excited to be in front of the camera as always. She loves when I'm sitting here for petting. So we've been going through a series on the Ten Commandments. We are near the end. We are on number 9 tonight. Reference to Beatles song that I've never understood, probably never will understand. Not the point. Of the commandments, we of course have 1, God alone is God, don't worship other gods. 2, don't keep idols. Historically, they've often had horns. 3, I know numbers. 3, don't misrepresent God's will, because words, W, matter. So don't say that God told you to do something that God did not tell you to do. 4, keep the Sabbath day. The thumb is resting because it's the Sabbath. 5, honor your parents. That might be a salute, or creating the kind of a family that wants to stick together and has a healthy dynamic. 6, don't murder. Just don't do it unless it's a spider. I'm projecting. God doesn't say kill spiders. That's entirely me. 7, don't commit adultery. When 2 people make vows in front of their community, that means something and they should be faithful to those vows. 8, don't steal or you go to jail behind bars. So tonight we have 9, don't lie. And next week we have don't covet. This is 10 fingers, coveting. So, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, as we read in Exodus 20:16. So this is not a single word in the Hebrew, it's a whole phrase. The last handful of commandments all were one word in the Hebrew because language can do that, which is kind of cool. So, but the Hebrew nuances of the wording here, include don't lie, but go a little bit beyond that. So the commandment kind of assumes a legal setting. So it's like false witness, but also the sense of malicious witness or even violent witness, which shall not bear violent witness against your neighbor is a bit more dramatic sounding, but not quite how it was translated. But what might it mean to bear malicious witness or to bear violent witness? That's definitely a different sense of saying, yeah, I saw him at the place, he did the thing, as opposed to being like, no, I saw him murder the person, and because I saw him murder the person, these things should happen. That might be a bit more of a malicious or a violent witness. That you're deliberately claiming that somebody did something that will result in a very harsh punishment. But this doesn't have to be in an exclusively legal context. Don't lie if you're under oath or on a witness stand or whatever, but also maybe don't lie in other cases. Maybe just don't lie, I guess. But there are a lot of things that might fall under lying or malicious witness or false witness, such as, for example, slander or libel, saying untrue things about somebody to kind of besmirch their character, whether that is spoken or written. Gossip could definitely fall under false witness, because gossip doesn't tend to be entirely truthful things, but slightly exaggerated things, or saying things in a way that really bring out the negative aspects of somebody's character. You might say that you saw somebody not pick up after their dog, but you're not mentioning that the reason for that was because they were helping someone cross the street, or not mentioning good things about somebody, but really focusing on one small bad thing that they did. That's not the most representative description of a person, so that could definitely be false witness. Maybe if you're asked to write a reference or recommendation for somebody and you're very dishonest, they're a hard worker, or exaggerated, the most dedicated person I've ever seen. No one's ever asked me to write them a reference. I hope that I would be kind but representative if asked. Maybe an overly mean Yelp review could definitely be false witness. Catfishing, is when you create an account like on Facebook or something under somebody else's name or picture, or just a made-up name, in order to get information from somebody, or to find out more about them. That's catfishing. But also, I think if you use the anonymity of the internet, because it's not like Facebook would confirm that you are exactly what you say that your name is, and you can have multiple accounts on quite a lot of different websites, and you could set up 50 different accounts that have 50 different very critical posts about, say, your mayor, for example. And that would very much imply to somebody reading through all of these comments, wow, there's a whole bunch of people who really don't like this person. Maybe I should look into that and, like, rethink my opinion of them. But really, it's just one person who's saying all of these things under different names. Or if you conveniently happen to have a different last name as your sibling, and write letters to the editor that are just glowing praise of this person, it's a little dishonest because you're totally related to them, but you're implying that you're not because you're using a different name. Anyway, there's so much lying on the internet. In conclusion, there's so much lying on the internet. Withholding information definitely could count as false witness. It's not that you're saying something that's not true, but you're leaving out extremely relevant facts, or maybe facts that you don't think are super relevant, but maybe actually are. Leaving things out. Using slurs against groups of people, definitely false witness. There was an interesting debate that a friend of mine got into on the internet quite a few years ago. I think we might have been in college at the time, which is interesting that it was so memorable. But it was a distinction between saying something insulting and saying something offensive that I thought was really an interesting distinction. I mean, ideally, we would, not insult people. And also ideally we would not be offensive to people. But there is a very there's a difference between saying you have said something that is, like, categorically incorrect and implies a lot of things that maybe you didn't mean to imply, and this is a bad thing that you have said. But that is very different from, oh my gosh, you are just like this large group of people who all of whom are awful for whatever reason. Maybe don't make large generalized statements about people. But I just thought that was a really interesting distinction between insulting and offensive, because if you're going to take issue with somebody, it's definitely a lot more effective and honest and accurate to take issue with the thing that they've done that you have a problem with. It's a better conversation than saying you're a bad person, than as opposed to saying, could we talk about this thing that you did? I'm concerned about that. So maybe implying that somebody approves of an action. It's like, the principal didn't not say that we couldn't do this. You ask somebody for permission and maybe they didn't quite hear you and they're like, yeah, whatever. But then you present that as, they said I could. That's not exactly accurate. Stretching the truth, definitely. Could be lying or false witness, for sure. Little white lies are a very interesting ethical question. It doesn't hurt anybody to say, yes, your hair looks amazing. I guess that there's a time and a place, and intent is definitely important. And if the little white lie is intended to make somebody feel better about something that perhaps they can't change, that is a very different thing than lying on a witness stand, for example. But it can be a very interesting ethical quandary. Claiming that you have authority that you don't have, or claiming that you have expertise that you don't have. Saying that you know a lot about psychology when you're a first-year college student, you've taken one class. Expert is really stretching things. I've read one book on this thing, so yeah, I know a lot about it. I mean, I guess it kind of depends what the book and the context is, but implying that you are the authority on something. I definitely would never claim to be an authority on pretty much anything that I do. There's a couple things that I probably know more things about than most people that you will encounter, but I am not a top world leading expert in anything, and I am definitely not the final word on really anything ever. Cherry picking data definitely is a thing that happens and is frustrating. Definitely is misrepresenting something. So yeah, that's false witness, or that's lying. I'm sure there's a whole lot of other things that could fall under this category, rather than the handful that I kind of jotted down this afternoon. But there are a lot of things that are kind of lying. Maybe we wouldn't, if somebody is gossiping, I would probably say this person is gossiping rather than this person is lying. But it's just kind of how things are framed. But then again, framing things in certain ways can in and of itself be false witness. Anyway, so what other ways can words become violent? Because, oh boy, there's a lot of ways that words can become violent. Because the more that we generalize people or groups of people, the easier it is to see them as something else. And the less that we find in common with other people, the easier it becomes to hurt them. We as humans really like things to be in order and to understand that things have categories. But humans are a lot more complex than that. You can divide people up by their hair color, but what's that going to tell you about them? We all do have things in common. Sometimes it's a lot harder to see than others. But when we see ourselves as being very different from another person or another group of people, then the language can kind of evolve from they're different to they're weird, or they're worse than us, or they're less qualified than us. And it can be a very slippery slope into justifying violence towards them. And that is problematic. And I do recognize that wording and names for identifying groups of people can change, and that can be confusing. But it is still important to listen to people when they say that's not the best word to use. We do all slip up sometimes, but there's a pretty big difference between I slipped up, I didn't mean it that way, I'm sorry, I'll try to use a better word in the future, rather than it's too complicated, I don't even care, I'm just going to go on saying what I've been saying for years and years because it's easier. Nothing in life is easy. Nothing in life is easy. Anyway, one particularly interesting ethical quandary case study that I remember from a class in ethics that I took in college. So hypothetically, a gang of Nazis is pounding on your door and asks you if you are hiding anybody in your apartment, which in this case you are. We're assuming that you are. So do you lie to save their lives? Or do you honor the 9th commandment and tell the truth? Which is more important, lying to save someone's lives or telling the truth to honor our God, who we know is the way, the truth, and the light? I would argue lie to save somebody's life, for sure. I don't see that as a particularly difficult, just at least in the case study. I imagine that in real life it would be a lot harder decision if my own life was on the line. But there are people who would argue that no, you need to tell the truth in every circumstance, which is really, really interesting. I am not an expert ethicist, but there's such interesting implications of all of these things. So what would it look like if we lived in a more honest society? I can't tell you that. I'm not sure I can imagine it. It would be cool. Maybe we could trust each other more. That would be neat. But perhaps the most important question is, how does this commandment encourage us to love God and to love our neighbor? Because, as it has been said, all of the laws boil down to two things. One, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And two, love your neighbor as yourself. So how does the commandment to not lie or to not bear false witness encourage us to love our neighbor? Well, it's, for one thing, it's not a particularly loving thing to go around lying about people and presenting them in the worst light possible, for sure. But maybe in a more positive light, we should uphold the things that are good about people, maybe mention good qualities in conversation rather than letting it be silent there, speaking well of people when necessary, and considering the weight and consequences of our words, because what we say definitely has consequences, and I'm sure we can all think of examples of when people have said very mean things to us that have hurt our feelings, because we are humans and we all have that experience. So using words to lift up and not to put down as much as humanly possible. We are all going to mess up because we're human, but words do mean things, and we should strive towards truth as much as we can to the benefit of our entire society. Friends, I hope that some of you join me tomorrow night for our Wednesday evening prayer and for our time of Zoom fellowship on Thursdays. And in the meanwhile, hey, I know you're very comfortable on the electric blanket there, but we're saying good night to the camera. Good night until we see you again.